Hello everyone! Welcome to another Animation Friday. I apologize that I wasn't able to upload this video yesterday. I really wasn't feeling well, so making videos wasn't an option for me yesterday. However, I am feeling a little better, so I'm going to be doing both videos today, Fridays and Saturdays. So I'm going to start off with this Animation Friday, kind of briefly discussing a very interesting aspect that I find when it comes to animation. What I find really interesting when it comes to animation is the animator's ability to give life to things that wouldn't be given life to in, I would say, the majority of live action films. This includes inanimate objects like toys, like cars and appliances, and also animals, specifically as well, because that's also a very big factor when it comes to giving more human-like personalities. So not only is it human-like personalities to inanimate objects, it's also to animals as well, because they'll have animals talk, and the animals will do various things. Usually, a lot of the times in animation, usually these kinds of characters are usually the side characters, but we've been seeing more recently they becoming more of the focus. For example, the Brave Little Toaster is a perfect example of inanimate objects really being the central focus of the film, along with films like Toy Story, Cars, this whole surge of inanimate objects, as well as this surge of focusing on animals, which I think animals goes a little bit further back. I think inanimate objects really started to kick off into films a little bit later on. But I think there's an interesting appeal when it comes to giving life to things that really wouldn't be given that kind of human level characteristics, like giving human characteristics to a vacuum, or giving human characteristics to a car, giving human characteristics to an animal. It's all really fascinating, I think. And I think the large appeal for that is because when we're children, we often like to play with things that aren't real. For example, toys, even cars, even action figures or dolls. That we as children love to explore the non-living, as well as the living with animals, because again, animals are living, but usually I think children like to think of them as on that same level as they are. And so they sort of breathe life into these things because they use their imagination. And I think animators really saw this. They saw the appeal of putting some eyes on a car. They saw the appeal for putting faces onto inanimate objects. They saw the appeal of making animals talk and do human-like things. But the majority of the time, I think this is a good marketing tactic. However, I think beyond it being just a marketing tactic, it's also really led to a lot of innovation with animation. The first CGI animated film is Toy Story, and it largely revolved around inanimate objects, toys. These things, though, have been in the works. We have seen toys come to life. It's nothing new. If you thought Toy Story was the first to do this with an animation, unfortunately not. There were other cartoons that have done this. But I think we started to see these kinds of focuses being emphasized within children's films a lot later on. But they were within children's films cartoons. Like, for example, Cars wasn't the first Cars. We had short cartoons in the 50s from Disney, I think in particular, that had cars, have like these features. I think they would even give houses human-like features too, and a lot of these were based on, you know, children's stories and things like that. And I think there is this huge appeal for children when it comes to giving life to these inanimate things. And I think a lot of kids identify with it. They understand it because they're using their imaginations because they're children, and usually more realism comes to them when they grow older and they realize that these were just inanimate objects. Although I think children initially know it's inanimate objects, I just think that they always wish that they were real. That's kind of how I always saw it. I was like, oh, I wish this doll could talk. I wish I could, you know, have that companionship, you know, with the doll or whatever. But I think there's really an appeal when it comes to children, and having your characters not just be human, but be different things, be either animals, be they inanimate objects, be it toys. You know, those things really are a very impactful part of animation, because a lot of the times that's how animation was really focused on. I think it largely started in part with animals, because I think that there is sort of a more universal appeal with animals as opposed to inanimate objects. Case in point, if you watch the opening of the 101 Dalmatians Disney film, the animated one, you'll notice that the people look a lot like their dogs, and and I think that there's some truth to that, maybe more or less. But again, what I'm emphasizing is that it's not just an appeal for children. Animals appeal really all around in different demographics. But I think specifically children like animals because, again, it's somebody you can associate with, except not maybe on the same level as you can associate with a human. And when you give them human-like characteristics, it makes it all the more imaginative. It makes it all the more exciting. And I think it only makes sense that animators and people who were trying to come up with these ideas, they knew that these ideas were very, very appealing and could breathe some sort of life and creativity with that. Now, can it sometimes be a little bit too on the marketing side? Can these kinds of, putting in these kinds of, animals and putting in these inanimate objects in and making them alive, can they be more geared towards marketing rather than trying to present a good quality film, animated film or cartoon? Yeah, I think there is that kind of case, you could say. I think in particular Cars is a perfect example. And you'll see a lot of these little boy t-shirts. They have like the cars on it. Like they'll have Steve, or is it Steve McQueen? I think it's McQueen or something, or Lightning McQueen or something like that. They'll have his whole image on the t-shirt, which is obviously Pixar property. But again, there is this. I've seen it everywhere. It's on shoes. It's on. I'm sure that there's also toys that they made from them. I think Lucas did this a lot with the Star Wars prequels, where there were a lot of toys that kids could play with. And probably in the older versions too, maybe they had some kinds of toys too. But there was, I think, this surge of trying to make these things really marketable, because hey, if we've got something that's within a film, we can market merchandise towards that object, and kids will buy that because it's a film that they saw that they really like. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we have princess dolls, we have, or they'll make humans into dolls. Again, it kind of goes in reverse here. Human animated characters into dolls, basically inanimate objects, or they'll they'll have lots of flounders everywhere, or they'll have lots of what's maybe another big popular Disney animal, tons of Mickey Mouse merchandise, and again with cars, like that same marketing appeal. With cats too, I think there's been probably some for girls, like that little cat from the Aristocrats, the sassy one. That's kind of the one that they I think try to market to, but a lot of it is based within animation. It's not based within live action film, and it's almost, I think, a good. I think even though that some of this may deter the overall quality of a film, and they'll instead make money off of what they can merchandise. I think it's still a good thing that they have these kinds of things available for kids. I mean, it's nice to have something that's from a film that you like, but I think it all just depends on the quality of the film, and I think maybe parents are a little bit more selective, probably, when it comes to being a consumer nowadays. But it really all depends, I think. So to say whether the marketing aspect is a good or bad thing is something that I can't really I can't really determine from my own reasoning. So it's just something that I think is just interesting to point out. And regardless, I think when you're giving the characters who are inanimate objects the center stage, you're giving them something. You're giving kids something different than what you're giving when you're putting a human character as the forefront. It's a hugely different experience, because usually there's different messages, I think, that come out of them. And I think some very profound messages. And you'll see this within films like Toy Story. You'll see this within The Brave Little Toaster. You'll see this in Cars, even though some people might say that Cars' themes are a little bit cliche. But regardless, I still think that it's not a... at least I don't think Cars is as bad as the nostalgia critic makes it out to be. I mean, yes, it's a little kooky, it's a little bit ridiculous, but at the same time, it's a cute film. I mean, I know it's not one of Pixar's best, but I don't think it's horrible. The second one, though, I think you can make a legitimate argument for that one, but for the others, I don't. For the first one, I don't know. But regardless, I think there is some things that can be learned from having these kinds of characters and focusing more on inanimate objects and creating something very human out of it and something very identifiable. And I think you can see this with, like, even within the Disney shorts, like, the Susie the Car, I believe it's called. And then there's another one with its where it's about a little house called The Little House. And they do bring up some things that do feel very human. They do feel like they hit us hit that human emotion, that human chord, and you identify with the inanimate object, because you realize that inanimate object is really alive in that setting. So it's again playing with reality, totally playing with reality, and I love. That's one of the reasons why I love animation. You can play with reality. It doesn't matter. You can create anything and just draw it on paper, and it's there, and it doesn't matter, and it doesn't have to make a whole lot of sense because it's not within reality. And that's why I think animation is just so fascinating. But they still can create things, though, that are fairly realistic and still have that same appeal. within animation. But I think animation is really known for pushing that envelope and trying to give us characters that are largely not human, or giving a lot of cutesiness. And again, some people might say that, oh, they're trying to sell us on the cutesiness of the animals, not really on the story or the characters and things like that. And I completely understand that point too. It's kind of the same with cars, like, oh, they're just sticking some eyes and some and then a smiley face and then calling it a car, and then it's going to get all the kids to buy all the merchandise. And yeah, I understand there is a huge appeal for kids when it comes to that kind of stuff. And that's kind of just how it works. But as to whether or not having like merchandise is a good or bad thing, I think it just varies. And it depends too on, you know, what kids will buy and what kids are interested in. And I think it's really important to understand that demographic when you are making an animated film, or at least an anime film that appeals towards kids. I don't know if really merchandise for adults works in the same capacity, but I have seen adult cartoons with merchandise too, and people will buy it, or they'll have T-shirts, you know, things like that too. So it's calendars, whatever. They'll have everything pretty much that focuses or revolves around that show or something like that. So again, the merchandising and focusing that merchandising more on animals and on inanimate objects, I think really has a huge appeal for people. And a lot of people identify with it. I think, and in particular kids, I think identify with it because they're getting something worth value for them, because they're in that stage of having toys, having things to play with, exploring their minds. You know, that's what kids do. So it only makes sense that these things would kind of happen. But I think though that's really ultimately all I can say about the topic. I think it's a really important and interesting aspect to animation, animals, and inanimate objects, and I think they'll continue to be a huge focus and a huge appeal for children. And you see this with Pixar, you see this with I don't think so much with Disney, at least right now. Again, Disney's focused more now on human characters, but maybe sometimes a little bit of animals, but really they're focused in more on human characters. They might go back, but that might not be until a while. But really, that's all I think, though, that I can really bring up when it comes to this topic. But I think it's very interesting. I think it's really fascinating, these kinds of concepts and putting them into these cartoon films and these cartoon shorts and these TV series. I think it's very fascinating, and there's, I think, a huge appeal for it, and it only makes sense because I think children gravitate towards these kinds of things. But I think that's really all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.